Okie dokie, good afternoon. It is March the 13th, 2025. It's just me today. Our producer AJ is off doing a real job, a big boy job, and it's a Scouching Live Classic episode today. So we'll see how this goes. You know, I'm excited. It's there's lots going on, at least for me in my world. It's crunch time as we're getting into the final few months of NHL draft season. I hope you're all doing well. You know, this has been an exciting 2025, I guess you could say, since January the 1st. Obviously, a new season of Survivor got started. We're 3 episodes in, and I think it's going to be another banger and a half. It's a real good time. But we're here to just talk hockey, you know, so welcome. I mean, if you want to talk about something else, we're more than happy to oblige. But anyway, welcome to Scouching Live. I'm super excited to have you all back once again. I come armed with my President's Choice Orange Cream Soda Sparkling Water, which is a free advertisement, Galen Weston. You're welcome. But it's excellent. You know, got it on sale at the grocery store, and it turned out to be a pretty good investment. But we're not here to talk about sparkling water unless you really want to. But the way this is going to work, I obviously will just keep up with the chat and everything. But I also will just quickly run things that I've taken a look at since the last time I did a show on my own, which was last week on Thursday. So that list includes Logan Hensler, Quinn Beauchene, Cole Temple, Václav Nestrasil, Arvid Drott, Victor Eklund, Cole McKinney, Shane Van Saggy, Justin Carbonneau, Carter Bear, Cole Reshny, Malcolm Spence, Dakota Rayo Mullen, Anthony Alain Samake, Victor Klingsell, Jake O'Brien, Conrad Fonderk, Roger McQueen, Michael Sverchek, Cameron Schmidt, Max Westergaard, Linus Funk, Ivan Ryabkin, and LJ Mooney was the last one I did. So if you have any questions about those specific players, please just fire them away. We're going to get to chat questions in a minute. I also have to make an announcement that as a makeup call for AJ being not here today, he offered me tickets to the Leaf game tonight. So we are going to be at the Leaf game tonight, which is going to be a good time. They're playing the Florida Panthers with Brad Marchand, which is still just like a mind-boggling life change for me, adapting to that. So that's going to be a thing. So we're probably going to, you know, muck some hot dogs and watch the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers duke it out. And we'll see what they've got. I haven't been to a Leaf game since the last time we went to a Leaf game last year, I think so. But anyway, also, yeah, I don't think we're having audio issues. I tested it and just listened, and I think we're okay. So not sure what that's all about, but yeah, I still need to replace this microphone cable. I'm lazy, but we'll get there. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to the Leaf game tonight. It's going to be a good time. Anyway, so let's just jump right into it. In terms of recent shifts on the list for me, I mean, I bumped LJ Mooney up quite a bit. I think he's finally starting to find, you know, a little bit of his legs back, a little bit of that dynamic, you know, play driving ability there. I still think he's a long shot, but I've moved him up quite a bit. Who else moved around a little? Cameron Schmidt remains one of the most fascinating guys in the draft. I did take a look at Roger McQueen since he's come back from injury, so we can talk about that. But I moved him down on my list a little bit. And who else has moved around here? I don't know. I bumped Carter Bear down a little bit, I think. Victor Eklund obviously stayed where he was. Logan Hensler I bumped up a little bit, but not too much. I mean, things are starting to solidify for me a little bit, where it's getting to the point where I'm watching players or watching guys, and I'm sort of going, okay, I've seen this story before, and it just reinforces what I already have seen and thought. So once this starts to happen, things start to solidify, and I think probably early April, you'll get another ranking from me, and there will be a lot of write-ups in there. And of course, if you're a subscriber to Scouching.ca, which you can, you know, go there now and check it out, you'll get early access to those rankings as soon as I'm finished them, but we're not there yet. And again, if you have any questions about any of the specifics with regards to tracked data, this is your opportunity to fire it off. This is a snapshot of where things are at right now, and kind of an example of what we can be looking at some point in this show if you have any questions. So, all right, let's get into the actual chat here. Let's start talking hockey. Let's start talking whatever it is we're going to be talking about for the next 2 hours. All right, TJ, what's up, man? A lot of rankings seem low on Christian Eperson. What's your assessment on him? I've seen games where he looked great with Potter and Horkoff at the NTDP and with Misa and Saginaw, but it's a small sample size. Yeah, I've got Eperson on my watch list for now. I've seen Eperson a few times live, and I've seen Eperson on video a little bit here and there. I mean, I think he is a very good sort of complementary playmaking, play driver guy. I don't know if the sort of pace of his game and the skating ability and everything is like quite enough where I'm gonna draft him in the first few rounds of the draft. But I mean, in terms of re-entry players who have really come a ways since last season, Eperson is definitely one of them. I think that there is an interesting case there with him. He's a smart passer, sees the ice really well. He has some pretty good skill to throw guys off pursuit from him. But I agree. I think him with me. I mean, you put anyone with Michael Nisa and it'll work. Just look at Igor Chernyshov, and I'm a big fan of Chernyshov. And I mean, with Potter and Horkoff, I mean, I think those types of players, like that's kind of, if you think about it, Eperson, Potter, Horkoff is probably like a pretty common and standard line combination you'll see these days, where you have sort of a bigger pressure-absorbing guy like Horkoff with a dynamic, incredibly fast and skilled guy like Cullen Potter, and you have a stable, sort of puck-moving, puck-touch-focused, quick passing guy like Eperson. Like, all of those traits kind of offset each other pretty well. And I think that's where you see a lot of successful lines. So I think with Eperson, it'll be just a matter of like who you put around him. And I mean, in terms of a guy who can move the puck okay through his passing and see the ice well, he's pretty good at it. So he's on my list, but I don't know. I don't think he's a guy that I run up to grab, but I feel like someone will grab him second round or something like that, third round, and he, is on a faster track to go into pro hockey, which is, I guess, a positive to some people. Honestly, okay, and then there's a follow-up. Seems like a lot of rankings have him in the 50s, and I would guess he's in the 30s. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it just becomes a matter of, when it comes to guys like Eperson, it becomes a matter of, if I drafted him last year and I saw him with the season he's having this year, where would I be happy having drafted him last year, right? And I think for Eperson, for me, considering the talent that's available in this year's draft and everything, I don't know. I feel like a mid-round, second-round pick makes sense. For me personally this year, I just think there is a lot of players who are very, very intriguing longer-term bets. Obviously, we're splitting hairs a bit with regards to a year. And if someone came up to me in this year's draft class at like 40 and was like, I adore Christian Eperson, and I think he's going to be, I think you might not be getting a good read on him, and I want to take him here, I could see why. So I'm not against it, but I am more biased towards betting long-term on different sort of packages of talents, and more, I feel like more comfortable with regards to NHL projection. But he's a good player. Is it time for a moratorium on the Sharks 2020 draft class? I remember being optimistic that at least 1 to 2 players would come out of it. Do the Sharks suck at development? Well, I mean, I don't think the Sharks suck at development. I mean, look at the team right now. Obviously, they're not a good team in the NHL. But when you look at the 2020 draft, let me just pull it up here. One moment as I pull up what their draft was, because I do remember in 2020 being excited about that draft class for them as well. And I don't think I was the only one. But I also don't quite remember exactly who that was that they picked. I know like Thomas Bordeleau was on that list. 2020. Right. Ozzy Weisblatt, Thomas Bordeleau, Tristan Robbins, Daniil Gushchin. Pardon me, but the crop works. Okay. Daniil Gushchin, Brandon Coe, Alex Young, Adam Raska, Linus Oberg, Timofey Spitzerov, rounding things out. I mean, okay, so I think with Ozzy Weisblatt, he's a very interesting one that I actually want to go back and look at, because I really did like a lot of what Ozzy Weisblatt brought to the table with regards to the speed and the skill of his game. And so honestly, when I think back to what I remember of him in his draft year, I had him in this range, like late first round, I think maybe a little bit higher. And I really did like sort of the tenacity in his game and the aggressiveness. And obviously, being at the age that you're at, it's not necessarily over, really. But I do think now you can sort of start really reflecting on what it is that you have. Thomas Bordeleau, I mean, Bordeleau wasn't the best guy on my list there in 2020 anyway. But I did like him. Like, I think Bordeleau with Bordeleau, I think the problem was what I thought was the issue when he was young, right? Like, undeniably really, really skilled, but didn't really have that motor and that energy and that resilience that I think a smaller player kind of really, really needs to have in the NHL. I just am not sure about, I wasn't sure about how he would project to the NHL. And, I mean, he is a relatively productive player when he plays in the NHL, but he just hasn't found a job yet. And we'll see what happens with him. I mean, maybe there's a plan that we're not aware of. Tristan Robbins, again, similar to Bordeleau, like really exciting, fun player to watch, really skilled. But again, like projecting to the NHL, I remember in 2020 going like, yeah, he's very fun to watch and like definitely very, very skilled and pulls off some crazy stuff. But is the NHL style of play really there for him? And I remember having a little bit of doubt about him. But I remember also, like, keep in mind, right? This is important. The NHL draft, like, almost everybody doesn't work anyway, right? Like, the number of NHL players who come out of the draft in any given year is relatively limited, especially if you're drafting outside the top 50 or 60. Like, if you get anything with those players, you look real good, right? So for Tristan Robbins, like at 56, you're betting on the upside, you're betting on the skill, you're betting on the potential there. And that's a good thing. Like, you probably want to be doing that, right? Like, there's probably not that many players in 2020 that went beyond 56 that are full-time NHL players. Danila Prokhorov at 76, I thought was a fantastic pick. And again, a 76th overall pick getting NHL games, not everybody gets that. And, in the next year, they drafted Ben Gaudreau 81st, and they didn't sign him at all. I still think that there's something with Prokhorov, right? Like, I really do. I do think that with Prokhorov, there's something interesting there. But I also think that I think back to when the Sharks had, like, Jonathan Dahlen. And this was a few years ago, but I do wonder if there's this environment of, like, this sort of non-North Americans coming to a place like San Jose and just maybe having to battle uphill a little more. Like, Prokhorov was a great player in the AHL this year, and he hasn't been as productive this year, and that seems a little bit hard to square. And I think letting go of him would be a mistake. And whenever I've watched him in the NHL, like, he's on the fourth line, so he's not going to get that many opportunities. But he's a good player. Like, I think he plays well once he's in the NHL. And I think that, there's you give him some reps and you give him some ice time, and I think you might get something out of him. Brandon Coe, again, a guy I really liked. Big, lanky, skilled guy, and bit of a project, and not always going to work. And the rest of the draft, like, I didn't really think much of any of these players, really. I remember Adam Raska being a real ratty jerk, which he is, great. And there's a job for that as well. He got 13 games, and who knows? But that's what I remember of him. So in retrospect, I mean, when I think back to my 2020 list, which I have started to really sort of look back on and think about, I don't know. Like, when I look at who the Sharks drafted, I can't really fault them for a lot of the decisions they made. I mean, for me, like, Marat Khusnutdinov went 37th, one pick before Bordeleau. That's who I would have gone with at that pick. JJ Peterka was almost on the board. He would have been the second best player available for me there. Weisblatt was my 25th ranked guy, but I thought much more of Khusnutdinov than him. Jan Mysak would have been a guy that I might have thrown a pick at. Ronnie Hirvonen, like, all these guys who just haven't really worked out all that well. Jean-Luc Foudy, Alexander Pashin, all these guys I really liked as long-term bets. But, when I look at all of these players, I see a lot of guys who just never really panned out. The guys lower on my list that did were the more safer, defensive-oriented guys that, that I definitely have learned a lesson over the years to value quite a bit more, right? Like there is such a thing as defensive value. So guys like Caden Gooley and Braden Schneider and Brock Faber all come to mind there. Anyway, yeah, I mean, but this is how it goes, right? Like, you never really know with NHL draft classes who's going to work out and who isn't. And a lot of these guys are still young. So we'll see what happens, but I see where you're coming from. Is there a league outside North America you think more people should watch for fun? Some of the clips from a recent Asian competition were exciting, but I'm not sure where to find games in that region. Well, I mean, it depends, right? Like, it depends on what you mean by fun, right? Like, I really enjoy watching these junior-aged players down at the bottom end of the world rankings. Like, I think it's awesome, and it's a lot of fun. And there's, you see sort of countries that are taking steps and everything. Like Hong Kong almost just got a double promotion in under 18 hockey, just fell short and lost to Mexico. But, even Mexico, like there's a couple of kids on that Mexican team playing prep school hockey in the States. And I think there's one playing AAA hockey in Colorado. And so there are countries that are making inroads with potential, future higher-ish end talent. And that's kind of how it starts, right? And so for me, like there is a lot of places that are a lot of fun, but like in terms of accessible hockey to watch, the World Juniors, yeah, but the under 18s at really low levels, often you can find YouTube streams of them. I know the Siam Hockey League in Thailand streams all of their games, if not some of them. And I mean, a lot of these international tournaments, I think it does them a lot of favors when they actually do post things on YouTube. Like, I think YouTube is a great way to share, that kind of thing, right? Because if you lock it behind, say, the IIHF website and some proprietary video player or something, no one's going to watch it, right? So for me, I think that makes a lot more sense. And maybe one day when this website sponsors the entire Siam Hockey League, we'll be able to stream it in other places. I mean, I'm half joking about that. It's a life goal now. It's on my board. Spend the money and have a league named after me that I genuinely believe in. But anyway, yeah. But I mean, I guess I haven't really answered your question. The MHL is not a ton of fun, but it's accessible. It's on YouTube. Same thing with the Supreme Hockey League, the Russian minor and junior leagues. Honestly, yeah, just surf around YouTube. Like if there's something you're curious about, that's probably the best way to go, because watching places like Sweden and Finland and Switzerland and Germany, I don't think it's accessible from North America. I don't know a service where you can go and do that. College hockey, I mean, honestly, college hockey is great, but it's not North America. It is North American, so that's not part of your question. But more people should probably watch college hockey because it's awesome. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like these international competitions are a lot of fun. You see my son Yazarbek Rustamkhonov score a hat trick every game, and it's a good time. Okay, how do you view the season Lane Hutson is having? I have so much to say about the people disrespecting him, but I'll stop here. He's literally the defenseman with the most completed slot passes. Okay, so I've seen the Montreal Canadiens quite a few times this year because I am fascinated by Lane Hutson, and I don't think that you can really complain all that much about any NHL player any NHL defenseman at 20 years old who is on pace to score, 60 points this year, 65 points as a rookie. Like, automatically they're doing something right? Obviously, production isn't everything, but when you have a guy who's out there at 20 years old, 5'9", scoring that much, you got to sort of at least dig into it and see what's going on there. And I will say that I think Lane Hutson is one of these players that's a nice barometer of how much tolerance you have for players that outscore their issues. Like Lane Hutson, of course, right? I'm not going to lie. He's not the most amazing defensive zone defenseman ever. He's never been that way. That's never been his style of play. That's never been his bread and butter, right? That's obvious, But almost everywhere else, he makes up for it. Like, and to me, that's what I'm looking for in players, right? Like, I'm not thinking about hockey from the perspective of the net out, right? I think that you could think about it that way, but for me, I take in the whole ice surface holistically, right? Like if you're a really good defensive, like it's the same thing as like how I view a lot of players that are very offensive leaning. Shout out Nick Lardis' video room video yesterday. Very offensive leaning player. So when I watch a player like that, I go, okay, but like what about their 200-foot impact? Because to be a really good NHL player, you kind of have to bring a really good 200-foot NHL impact, in my opinion. And that's what I interpret as a good player. So if a player is really good in that offensive sense, are the shortcomings in the defensive zone overcome enough by everything else that it makes it work? Or are the defensive issues worse than the benefits offensively that you're getting? And I think that with a guy like Nick Lardis, it still remains to be seen. I worry more about forwards who are a bit more deficient in the defensive zone, whereas Lane Hutson, I mean, his rush defense is a lot better than I remember from when I was younger. His offensive zone play is dynamite. Like, he is lights out in that area of the ice. Came into the league, for years, people were questioning his defensive ability, and legitimately so, right? Like, for a little while, he was a points guy, people were questioning that. But then over time, he grew and got more mature, and they kept playing him, and now he's one of the best defensemen in the league. So honestly, with Lane Hutson, I go, obviously there are problems, but that doesn't mean that he's not good, right? Like, we did a show earlier in the season just for fun and called it Does Lane Hutson Suck Now? Because of the way people were talking about him. And so when we look at him, yeah, there are issues, right? But he's 20 years old, and by virtue of just how many minutes he's playing, everyone is going to make a mistake here and there, right? Like, that's impossible to avoid unless you're like Nicholas Lidstrom, which I don't think Lane Hutson is. So for me, I think there's a lot to love about Lane Hutson. I think he's an extremely promising player. It's a really good case study for me about betting on creativity and fun factor with your defenseman. And I love players like that. So yeah, I'm not super concerned about it. But again, like any young player, again, he's 20, right? He's 20 years old. He is 14 years my youth, right? He is a child. So let's give him some time and work out the kinks and shake out the cobwebs. And at the end of the day, right now, I think he outscores and outperforms the sort of deficiencies that people I think rightfully point out. But again, you zoom out and I think it's a lot more favorable. Is Adam Fantilli making the case as the best center from his draft? I mean, honestly, keep this in mind. Connor Bedard is basically a year younger than Fantilli, like 10 months or something like that. Like, they're quite far apart in age. Like, growing up, they'd play in different age groups, right? That being said, I love Adam Fantilli, right? Like, okay. Going back to the 2023 draft, I mean, Fantilli was my number 2. Bedard was my number 1. But I did have doubts about Connor Bedard. And I thought that at that time, with Chicago drafting guys, in retrospect, they also drafted guys like Oliver Moore, Frank Nazar. Like, they have options up the middle of the ice that in a few years might be able to allow Connor Bedard to be a winger. I always felt that Connor Bedard was a player that you kind of needed to let play that more offensive role, give him the freedom to sort of play the way he wants, but have that rock defensive center who can, not defensive, but like a guy who can help out defensively, who can move the puck, find Bedard, hit him with a clean pass, and sort of work off of a guy like Bedard really well, right? Like, just because I don't think Bedard is a center doesn't mean I don't think he's any good. But I think what we are seeing now is, like, when Bedard is playing center at this point in his career, he's responsible for so much when he's on the ice. And I'm not saying he's incapable of doing that at all. He's an incredible player. But it really does show some gaps that might be there. So for me, I always look at players and what their strengths are. And when I watch Bedard, he has a ton of strengths, but I just don't know if being a center is one of them. Adam Fantilli, on the other hand, always struck me as a guy who was going to be a center in the NHL, right? Like he has the strength in his game. He just wasn't using it a whole lot. He has the ability to move the puck really, really well, but he just wasn't seeing the ice particularly well as much as you might like a top end center to do. But the skill level and the shot and the playmaking in the offensive zone, it was all there, like in spades. And you could see really good results at both ends of the ice. Like his track data was really, really good. Not saying Bedard's wasn't, but Bedard's were, I mean, I could show you, but Connor Bedard really showed a couple of things. Obviously, elite offensive output. In the offensive zone, he was just constantly putting pucks on net, constantly generating offense, and doing it with playmaking as well. But he was not a very involved defensive player. He did not really get involved in the defensive zone very much. And he was very much hit me with a pass in the neutral zone and I'm going to do the rest. Or he'd wind up in the defensive zone and just go all the way. Like, I think it's still the case, but if you go and look at Connor Bedard's 5-on-5 shot chart, he took over half of his shot attempts in my data sample from the perimeter, right? He could get away with that because he's got that shot, but he did take the puck deep into the offensive zone and shoot from the goal line a lot. And it's like, well, okay, like, is that going to work in the NHL? Maybe if you're an elite of the elite shooter, once in a while, you'll get something like that past a goalie. But there's going to be lessons, right? Like, it's about the learning process from here and developing the player into like a better and better pro. So with regards to the question, I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if Connor Bedard finds a lot of success when Chicago starts getting out of the basement as a winger because of his style of play naturally and what he's best at this level. Which I guess would mean Fantilli probably is the best center from that class. But since they're both centers right now, and I still think that Bedard is the better player, I kind of answer Bedard by default. But at the end of the day, projecting out 5 years, if I'm king of the world, I get the feeling that a guy like Bedard is a winger on a line with a really solid, more mobile, 200-foot, physically intense center who can just play a simpler game and enable Bedard to sort of do what he does. Okay, you're the new general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. Cool. Awesome. I love Buffalo. And your predecessor needlessly moved Cousins and a second-round pick for Josh Norris, but good news, you have first overall in 2025. Who are you taking and what moves are you exploring? Oh, boy. Well, when I look at who Buffalo has in the system, just pulling this up now, in fact, I'll show you. Like when I look at what Buffalo has in the system, I see a lot of guys who there's a lot of forwards. Like you look at this, their top defensemen in my sort of modeling, so to speak, guys like Maxim Sturbach, Gavin McCarthy, Simon Pierre-Brunet, Nikita Novikov, and all of these guys I think don't have a tremendous amount of big time upside. So for me, I probably go with a Matthew Schaefer, right? Like obviously being a right-handed shot. Let me just pull up their daily face-off here. Like being a right-hand shot, obviously, you know, they have a few of those, but okay. So right now on their list on the team, they have Dahlin, Bryson, and Clifton listed on the right side. So for me, that makes it Schaefer pretty easily. You know, I love Michael Misa. I think he'd be a huge add up the middle to this team, but I'm not so sure that a guy like Schaefer wouldn't fit in here, right? Like if you have a Dahlin Schaefer down the right side, then I think you're going to be paid. Oh, he's a left-hand shot. My bad. He's a left-hand shot. So you've got Byram, Power, and Samuelson already there. In that case, I don't really know, but he does play the right side a lot in junior. So that's also something important to keep in mind. I don't know. At the end of the day, I think Buffalo needs to. It's a lot worse than. It's not necessarily just who do you pick first overall, right? I mean, but if I look at who Buffalo has in the system, I go, you'll probably have Hellenius in the lineup maybe after next season. A Jake Richard, I don't think is going to be a huge impact player, but like you got to hope that a Rossi, Wahlberg, Östlund, Kulich like really keep a job and become key players for the team. And that's a lot of decent options on the roster. But with regards to the Buffalo Sabres as they are now, like there's not a ton of defensemen mixed in there. Their best performing defenseman in my model is Luke Osborne. which is great news for me. But I think if you add a Schaefer and sort of deal with the issues, then great. I think if you have a Schaefer and deal with the problems, then go nuts. But I don't know. The second half of the question is interesting. What moves do you try to make? Honestly, when I look at the Buffalo Sabres roster, I don't know who I would want to trade that I would get much of anything that I think fixes the issues here, right? Like on the surface, you just look at this roster like AJ and I did at the beginning of the year, and you go, is this a playoff team? Like, is this really, like, I wouldn't have traded Cousins. I don't know. I don't know if there was something going on there with him, but like the guys I would want to keep on this roster are Benson and Thompson and not Zucker. Sorry. Like maybe Quinn, Krebs, Kulich. I don't know really about Josh Norris in Buffalo yet, but like the rest of the guys, like what are you really getting for Ryan McLeod, right? What are you getting for Jordan Greenway if you trade him? And I mean, even Greenway, like as a depth guy, he's kind of nice, but I don't know, right? I mean, I just keep thinking about the Buffalo Sabres and going, what if they just did a few things differently, right? Like I am on the record about I had Owen Power at 7 that year. This team with guys like, you put a Matthew Beniers on this team up the middle. I think that looks real good. And I mean, I don't know. And again, you could say revisionist history, but those two players were quite a bit of a ways apart on my list in 2022, 21, whatever year that was. And I mean, you're seeing Sabres fans, I think, pile on Owen Power a little too much, but recognizing the issues that have always been there in his game, right? Like the way he was advertised, people were talking about him like he was Victor Hedman. And that's not what he is, right? And I think people are realizing that. And is he a guy like at a first overall selection? He's on your bottom pair on paper. So honestly, the question to answer it, I don't know what I would do. I don't know. I think that like the Jack Eichel situation, I think turns out in retrospect to be a disaster. Like Jack Eichel and Matthew Beniers and Dylan Cousins up the middle of this team is a great 1-2-3. And I would, if I were Kevin Adams, I'd be moving heaven and earth to make sure that the Jack Eichel stays in Buffalo because, what was the dispute, right? The team doesn't want me to get a surgery. But the surgery has been done on UFC fighters before, and they're fine. So, and if you ask a bunch of medical experts, a lot of them said that it would be fine. So I don't know. And like at the end of the day, I don't know. It's a tough question to answer, but just a few things here and there with Buffalo, and things might be completely different. Completely different. But yeah, like, I don't know. Again, like Jack Quinn is another one. What if the Buffalo Sabres had Marco Rossi on this team instead of Jack Quinn? I liked Jack Quinn. Like he was a good offensive player. But again, I think people are realizing the shortcomings that were there in his game, that he's a bit limited outside the offensive zone and that, he's a bit more of a shoot first, ask questions later type guy, which is always a bit of a risk. Whereas Marco Rossi, I just went, again, like run it back. Eichel, Beniers, Rossi, all these guys, Cousins, I think you'd be laughing with that group of guys up the middle. And if you have guys up the middle who are rock solid, you're having a good time. So I don't know. Moving forward, what I would do if I'm Buffalo, you can't blow it up, right? This whole thing about Rasmus Dahlin recently, is that, I'm sure that Rasmus Dahlin, in a perfectly reasonable way, is tired of losing. In the same way that Connor McDavid was tired of losing. So with Rasmus Dahlin, for him to go, yeah, I'm tired of losing, and someone interpreting that as I want out if we don't start winning, I mean, those two things might be true at the same time, just maybe not in the forceful way that it was reported. And Dahlin rightfully stepped out and was like, that's not what I said. Like, that's not a thing that happened. It's but maybe somewhere in the middle is the truth. And I would believe it. So unless you have a plan to trade Rasmus Dahlin, who is not a young, spry chicken anymore, he's a vet. if you're gonna blow it up again and rebuild, so to speak, is Dahlin gonna stay? Or are you gonna keep a Dahlin around? Because if you trade him, you're losing that trade. And Owen Power, you're losing that trade probably. You used a first overall pick on him. I just don't know. So you have to deal with what you have. I don't think trading Cousins was that thing to do, but they do have good players here, right? Like Tage Thompson is fine. Alex Tuck is pretty good. Zach Benson has a ton of potential. But again, when I look at this roster, they kind of need a little bit of everything, and I don't know if free agency is going to fix it. I hate to answer the question this way, but I don't know. Because what I would have done differently in the past probably would look a little bit better now and be a little more workable, but that's neither here nor there. What do you think of Cameron Reed? Well, I'll show you. Cameron Reed. Cam Reed. So Cam Reed is just outside my first round. I have him at 33. I actually went and saw him last weekend with, oh my God. I saw him last weekend with Joel Henderson. That's the word I'm trying to think of. He came down to Ontario and we saw him in Kitchener. And he and I were chatting about him a little bit because he had heard his name before, talked about his potential first round pick. Like, Cameron Reed is very, very strange. He is a guy who kind of is very sort of pass heavy. He's very, very, very pass heavy. Like, his pass attempts per 60 is huge. His possession numbers are good, but his team is good. But like, there isn't a whole lot of offensive generation, and he shoots the puck from the point all the time. So for me, that combination is a little bit questionable. I'm not sure about his defensive ability, but he is a fantastic straight line skater. I don't know how like mobile he is as a matter of like being projectable defensively, but he strikes me as a good quick skating pass first guy who I think could develop into something a little bit more than that. But when I look at guys like him relative to the other guys in the NHL draft who play defense, I look at a guy, or what coaches are looking for in an NHL level defenseman. I look at guys like Radim Murtka and Blake Fiddler and even Logan Hensler, and I go, I feel like these guys are a little more projectable to some level of NHL role, whereas Cameron Reed, I feel like there's a lot of things in his game as he is now that I think might be a bit of an issue projecting to the NHL. But I still like him. Like, he's still my number, number 7 defenseman available. And you could convince me to take him over a Sacha Boumedienne for sure. But I think Boumedienne is a much more mobile player. Obviously, the decision-making with him is a lot more questionable. And I think, but he is an 07 playing in college hockey for a good team. So I'm not freaking out, so to speak, that a guy like that is not looking so good in college hockey. He at times doesn't look so good, but so does Cameron Reed, so does Blake Fiddler, so does Radim Murtka. These guys all kind of at times don't look great. So for Boumedienne, I think the mobility helps him out a lot more. I think there's a little bit more deception in his offensive zone play than Cam Reed. But in terms of passing the puck, I think Reed is one of the better passers at this level, at this age group, I should say, for this draft. So I like him. Is he going to go higher than I have him ranked? Probably. You never know. Central Scouting, I believe, has him in the as a second-ish round guy. So maybe that's what. So maybe that's where he goes, and I think that's, I guess, reasonable because of the questions about his game. But good player though. Like, always fun to watch him. I always enjoy games when I see him. But I think the projection is a little questionable. What's the hype around Danila Prokhorov being in the first round? Oh, yeah. Pronman dropping a banger. Yeah, so if you're not aware, Corey Pronman kind of, if you're a draft geek, dropped a bit of a bomb with Danila Prokhorov as a guy in his first round. And how? It was at number 17, I believe. The link's not opening properly for me. Yeah, so Danila Prokhorov is at 17. I recently have sort of seen him. I remember watching him early in the year and writing him down and going, who is this lanky freakazoid who is dangling guys and ripping pucks, and who is this guy? And when I watched full games of him at that point in the year, I kind of went, okay, like there's potential here. I wrote him down as a watch list guy early in the year, and I watched a little more and kind of went, you know what? In terms of skill and fun and curiosity, he's probably one of the best players I don't have ranked. But I just don't know if like the skating is really limiting him, I think, right now. But he is a pretty intense player. I tracked one game of data of his, and he was really good. So you can't take that away from him. And I'm going to do another one probably in the next 2 weeks. I do want to catch up on him because he is an intriguing player. And whenever this happens, whenever someone who definitely has connections and definitely talks to people is going, hey, I like this guy a lot. This teams are talking about this guy. I kind of have to go, all right, I'm going to check him out and I'm going to form some opinion of my own. So with Prokhorov, like I think that I could see him be a guy that gets drafted 35th overall. And a lot of people go, what in the name of heck is this? In the way that a couple of Russians have in the past. Kirill Marchenko was like that. An extreme example would be Yegor Chinakhov. And Alexander Romanov was one of those, I remember. And Prokhorov is a guy who I think has tons of potential. He's a guy who I think has a long way to go to get there. Like you look at his statistics, and he scores a ton of goals and not nearly as many assists. And again, we've talked about this on the show. That's worth digging into as to why, right? There are twice as many assists that can be handed out as goals. So why would a player be excelling in one and not the one where you have more opportunity to generate them? And so with Prokhorov, I mean, I think that his passing ability, like he's got reach, he can send pucks into the slot, he can put pucks around guys, but targeting guys is a bit of an issue for him. He's not moving the puck to players. He's just moving them in sort of the right direction, I suppose, kind of like a Justin Carbonneau does. And so with him, obviously, like you're betting on the length and the skill level and the shot. He's a wicked shooter. So I think there's something there. Like he is a guy who I have ranked in the late second round. And if you wanted him in the 40s or so, I probably would go, you know what, let's take the swing. He probably has as good a chance as any other guys in this range to really turn out to be something. And, if he fills out well and sort of maybe has the right guys around him at higher levels, then maybe there's something there. I would like to see him in the VHL at some point because he's kind of a bit bigger than everybody at his level, and that kind of gives him some leeway to play with. But intriguing player, interesting guy. I think top 20 is nuts. But again, sometimes NHL people just look at the guy and go, that guy can shoot and he's huge. He's Tage Thompson or something, right? And maybe that's the case. I don't see that in him. But, like I could see something there with him in 5 years, and maybe he develops into something very, very intriguing as a more offensive player. So we'll see. Okay. Have you seen? Thoughts on? Oh my god, thoughts on Marco Rossi? I mean, I've been a huge fan of Marco Rossi since 2019. I remember watching him in Swiss hockey as a junior player, and he was unbelievable there. I mean, like his draft year in Ottawa, he was spectacular, I thought. Just didn't have that, like, I don't know how to explain it. The only thing he didn't really have in his game outside of just being bigger was this like consistent ability to drive his own offense from scoring areas. But that's nitpicking for me. But Rossi, I mean, for a kid also, like just from what I heard from people about him in 2020 and talking to people and all that stuff, the kid, you don't want to bet. I love kids like him where you just don't bet against them. You don't look them in the eye and go, I don't think you're going to be an NHL player. Like just by default, you don't do that with Marco Rossi. And during the COVID pandemic, he nearly had a heart attack or whatever it was and died or could have passed away. He was very sick and missed a ton of time. And people were going, oh, is this like, is this a whatever? And then he didn't look amazing at the World Junior he was in that year and, whatever. But you got to hold fast on these things, right? Like you got to let the kid figure it out, especially one like Marco Rossi, where he's like, okay, if you write me off, whatever, fine. But I'm going to work harder than everybody and I'm going to figure it out. And he figured it out. I think he's great. I think it would be a huge mistake if Minnesota got rid of him for what if they got rid of him in a similar fashion as they got rid of Murat Kuznetsov and got a Justin Brazeau type instead. I think that would be a massive mistake. Maybe that's the answer in Buffalo. Maybe you get Marco Rossi anyway, and you find a way to get Jordan Greenway into Minnesota or something, back to Minnesota. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I love him. I think he's a great player. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the NHL. And again, he's an exceptional example of these guys I watch who are at all three zones of the ice, really impactful. In the offensive zone, he can create offense. He can go to the net. He can do all those things. Tip pucks, get in scoring areas, play make, everything. In the defensive zone, he works his tail off. He's grinding play down. He'll fight along the boards. He'll do all those things. And he's a great transition player, especially offensively. So he checks every box that I'm looking for, where if I'm building an NHL team and he's my second line center or something and he scores 65 points a season, I go, that is a strong 65 point player, right? Like that's, it's not like it's 65 points, 40 of them are on the power play and you wish he was someone else in the defensive zone. It's 65 points, and every time you throw him over the bench, the game's going to go in the right way, in the right direction. And the more that happens, the more likely it is you're going to score. I'll take that every day. Have you seen Yanni Newman's debut? No, I have not, but I'm really happy he's in the NHL. It's good for him. He's had a good season with Coachella Valley. Really fun player to watch. I remember him at the Hlinka tournament, and I'm going, who the heck is this kid? Maybe a little bit of a limited profile in terms of, NHL role, but big and heavy player who skates pretty well and has a wicked finishing ability. Honestly, there's a little bit of him in a Danila Prokhorov. Maybe there's something there. I think he's a little more skilled than Newman, but similar-ish profiles. What are we doing here? What do we got? But I do want to check that out. I do want to see him in the NHL, so I'll do that when I have time, which is not much these days. Circling back to your conversation with Scott Wheeler a little while ago, all I could think of during your conversation of Murtka was that it sounded eerily similar to your conversation on Gooley. You've repeatedly said that you've learned to value players like Gooley better. Is it possible you're repeating this mistake again with Murtka? Well, I mean, I have Murtka at 15. Is Caden Gooley a guy that looking back is fine at 16th overall? Yeah. Right? Sure. Of course. He's a good defensive player in the NHL. Great. I mean, the thing about Gooley that I learned was I saw the defensive ability then. Like, I look at him and it wasn't just because he's big, you look at Radim Murtka and I can see how it's easy to compare the two, right? They're both really big defensemen, and maybe I'm wrong, right? But I see them as very different players. Caden Gooley, I mean, I think Radim Murtka is better moving the puck offensively. Like, he's a better, cleaner passer a lot of the time. I think he sees the ice a little bit better moving the puck up the ice than Caden Gooley does and did. But the thing about Caden Gooley that I loved when he was draft eligible in 2020 was how he defended. I just didn't value that enough, right? Like, Caden Gooley's lateral mobility, backward skating ability was excellent for his age, which I definitely should have valued more. And his ability to close gaps and not just be Radko Gudas out there, right? Like, the thing I loved about him was how he defended. It was always a stick first, and go play the puck first, separate the puck from the player, then separate the player from the play, right? It was that two-stage defending, right? It wasn't just, I'm going to crush this guy and whatever happens after that happens, right? He was trying to break the play up, work with his support, and then finish his check and really sort of separate players from where the game was going. And that, to me, is really high-level defending, right? You see Brock Faber do that kind of thing all the time, right? Like, to me, defense is not just hitting guys. So that's the thing I've learned to value a little more. With Murtka, yeah, he does that too, right? Like, he's pretty good at it. And again, like, he's a top half of the first-round guy for me. I just look at him, and in the context of who is available in this class, I'm not sure I would put him as high as Scott had him. He's a guy who, let me look here. Yeah, he's a pretty good passer in transition. His defensive numbers are pretty good. There's value in that. And he does move the puck pretty well. So he brings a lot of good traits to the game. He's a very well-rounded player, and I like him. He's in a tier for me that stretches up to 12 or 11. So I think that's reasonable, right? Like, if you really, really want him ahead of guys like Anton Frondel or, Jackson Smith or whatever, maybe. But I also always lean towards the guys that I think could capitalize on what issues Radim Mrtka has. He's a guy who really relies on his reach, and a guy who really relies on stick checks and more of a physical player deep in his own end. And his possession numbers are not very good. He kind of gets filled in defensively quite a bit. And that was not the case with Caden Gooley. Gooley was all defense all the time. Like, I don't know how many scoring chances they got when he was on the ice, but it was not very many. So with Mrtka, like, it's very malleable for me. Like, if someone really was pounding the table for him and a guy like Jackson Smith was off the table and I wanted a defenseman, he's the guy, right? But I just look at Jackson Smith and I see that better defensive ability plus a little bit more of an exciting NHL projectable offensive role. I think Mrtka is projecting more like a Caden Gooley in the NHL where it's more defensive leaning, but he's solid at it. He's a solid defenseman. I could easily see that. So it's not, I don't know. I think I just undervalued Gooley because there wasn't much offense there, projectably so at least. And the defensive play was so good. And I kind of went, well, whatever. You could sign a guy like that. But in reality, while that might be true, in the NHL draft, you get a really good defensive player like that who skates like that and plays defense like that. That's hard to find. And so, yeah, like that's the lesson for me. And I feel like if I had Mrtka at 30, sure, I would understand where you're coming from. But a top half of the first round pick, yeah, easy call for me. If I was forced to take over the Sabres, I'd burn it down, full rebuild. Well, I mean, you said you would leave Thompson and Dahlin. Those guys are what, in their 20s, like mid 20s? I'm just going to check how old these guys are. Because, yeah, Tage Thompson's 27. So by the time you do a full rebuild and tear it all down and do it all again, you're going to have a really young team next year. You're what, 3 years away? 2-3 years away. And so you're going to have Tage Thompson pushing 30. You're going to be paying him a lot. Rasmus Dahlin's going to be pretty close to free agency. Like Rasmus Dahlin's contract ends in 2032, which, okay, so maybe he won't be going to free agency, but like, are you really going to just two players on your team and going, we're going to blow this up again? Like Rasmus Dahlin was drafted in 2018. And he has not seen the playoffs. And that's not good. Like, I don't think you have an option to blow it up. You've also already drafted a ton. So, like, as ownership, are you really going to be cool with that? I think the issue is also bigger than just personnel on the team, right? Because, again, look at all the players that have left Buffalo and been great elsewhere. Like, that's why I've said from the beginning with Buffalo, I want to be a fly on the wall for this. I want to see what's actually going on here with these guys in this team that is sort of breaking everyone's mind such that when they leave, they're better, right? I want to tackle that problem, right? How did that Jack Eichel thing get to that level of a debacle? How is it that all of these players go elsewhere and get so much better? Like, that's the bigger issue. And I don't know. I can't say I know the answer, and I'm sure nobody knows the answer really, except smart people who work for the team, and they know that there's things that need to change about it, but I don't know what those things are. So that I think is I think that's a better question to ask, and I just don't think you have the option to burn it all down. I really don't. How does Kindle look with the tracking metrics? One of the best in the whole system. Let me look here. Kindle. So yeah, I've done a bit of him. I still have a game of his to do this week or next week if I have a chance. And let's take a look. I mean, it's excellent across the board. Incredible amounts of playmaking in the offensive zone, generates a huge amount of offense for his team, both off his own stick and off of his teammates' sticks. Good shot selection, does not waste his shooting opportunities. He can tip the puck, he can shoot the puck. He can do it all. Huge amounts of offensive zone generation, turnovers, and that's like at opposite ends of the ice. You have a guy who breaks up play a lot, and you have a guy who breaks up play in the offensive zone and keeps the puck hemmed in the offensive zone a lot. And yeah, he doesn't throw hits. He has thrown 0 hits in the games that I've done, which if you think that that's a bad thing, then fine. But at the end of the day, he's dominating possession. He's passing the puck a ton, has good completion rates, generating almost half of his team's offense during dominant possession. Like, no matter which way you slice it, the numbers look really, really good for him, except for, defensively on the rush, and once the puck's in the defensive zone along the boards. You don't see him super involved there. But as a support player, as a guy who's more of an open ice player and more of a quarterback style guy, I think he's great. He has that secondary ability to stop up, take a second look at the ice, and maybe juggle a couple of options. He's brilliant with his passing in the offensive zone. He just doesn't jump out at you in terms of a lot of areas of the game where I think you kind of don't notice. But then at the end of the day, he's got 2 assists, and at the end of the day, you realize how important he is at moving the puck and generating offense. So it's great. Like, no matter which way you slice it, he's been one of the best players on paper for me, wire to wire this season. These numbers are pretty consistent every single game except one. And I'm expecting the same in the next one. And whenever I watch him on video, and I saw him in London and Oshawa at those top prospects games, and he was excellent there. Didn't get a whole lot of fanfare because he didn't stand out. He doesn't have that skill or, pure fun factor that I think a lot of people are looking for. But some of the best plays in those games he was making, and he's a lot of fun. Okay. When watching a player in isolation, how do you differentiate decision-making following team and coaching structure? Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough question to really tackle, because I don't off the top, you can't really, I don't think, in my opinion. I think that what you can do is really think about, like, the way a team breaks the puck out, the way a team rotates positioning in the offensive zone to create chances or something. The way all of those things are done is definitely very tactical and coaching driven. Special teams is extremely coaching driven, in my opinion. And I think a lot of the time, that's why I don't really pay attention too much to that, right? Like, it's, you pick the right personnel, you put them in the right system, and you should be able to find success on special teams, ideally, right? At 5-on-5, I think it is also important. Like, one thing I do notice, and this comes back to tracking data, it's not always gospel, right? If a guy is passing the puck out of the defensive zone 10 times, and on the other end, there is nobody there 9 times, that's problematic. And is that a systems thing? Probably not. Like, is that player expecting, is the other player just not in position 9 times out of 10? Or is it that the player making the pass is just not making good reads, right? Is it one or the other? It could be both, I suppose. But if there's a player who is sending passes 9 times out of 10 out of the defensive zone, and it just gets bobbled on the other end, or it's just deflected and sent to a teammate or an opponent, they played within the system clearly well, but the person on the other end kind of wrecked the good data point that was there. So hockey is a team sport in the truest sense. And there's a lot of things that happen that are not necessarily the player's fault. So when I'm watching a player in isolation, the biggest things that I'm looking for is the things that they and they alone are responsible for, right? Their general style of play, generally, like, it's up to the coach to recognize that and then build something around it or find something that works for that player. So at least that's my interpretation of what coaching should be all about, right? Motivating your players and putting them in a good position to succeed. Not, here's my system, play within it or you're benched, right? Like, that doesn't seem like very good coaching to me. So it's a matter of in my opinion, letting the players play the way that they play and then malleating, if that's a word, like molding them into whatever role you think fits them. So I think for me, I always am trying to just identify the style of play the player brings, right? Like, how physical are they? Are they bringing a lot of intensity in the defensive zone? Are they in transition? Are they carrying the puck a lot? Are they a pass first type guy? What's their skating stride like? Are they generating speed and pushing guys on their heels? Are they, making plays in the offensive zone? Are they overhandling the puck when they have it? Off the puck, are they trying to find lanes to the net so that they're uncontested for scoring chances or something? Like, all of these things, maybe they're the system, maybe at work, but I want a player who is at least doing those things, right? Like, if a coach tells them to do those things, they will go out and do it, right? That's kind of what I'm looking for, right? Because I don't really want players where I'm watching them and I'm going, this guy's spending 60 games of the year playing a way that I don't think translates to the NHL. Is that the coach's problem? I don't know, right? It can really depend. So at the end of the day, it's a tough question to answer because I don't really know how to answer that. And that's part of the rub, right? Like, I think that's something that is very underrated as a bit of a blind spot for this in general, right? Like, a system around a player or psychological motivation from the coach is very difficult to separate from what the player is actually doing if you really want a perfect understanding of everything that's going on. But I think you really do have to watch what the player does when they're called upon, and when they're not even called upon, what are they doing, right? Are they floating around, just sort of not really doing much? Are they, standing still in the offensive zone or whatever? And I think a lot of this comes down to why I track a lot of data. It's not necessarily to say this player is better than this player because of this. It's to go, this player is doing this, and I can work with that because of this, right? So it's a complicated question to answer, honestly. And I think that as an evaluator, you kind of have to accept that there might be things there that just are maybe not gonna be able to be, like, really fully and perfectly understood and separated properly. I think it's just the nature of the game, like just the nature of this sport. There's a lot of noise and there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of craziness and improvisation, right? Like, a lot of hockey also, good players, they improvise a lot of the time. So there's a lot of that too. And that's hard to separate, but you got to try, I try my best. Yeah, every week with the Michael Misa goal differentials there, eh? He's a good player. Have you seen Slafkovsky recently? When he finds consistency, he'll be a beast, especially in the playoffs. I've seen Slafkovsky every so often for a long time. And I agree. I mean, it depends on what you mean by consistency, right? Like, because Slafkovsky is a guy who I think is a complementary player. Like, I had him ranked at 4 on my list that year, 4 or 5, I think. And I mean, I guess I saw the appeal of taking him first overall, whatever. But is he a guy who I thought was ever going to, like, be a huge line driver and a premier NHL offensive player? Like, people were comparing him to Jaromir Jagr and stuff. And I mean, I see where they're coming from there, but I did not really see that in him, right? Like, again, when we're talking about separating from structure and everything, I saw Slafkovsky and I just went, okay, every time he steps on the ice, this guy makes it really hard to knock off the puck. He protects the puck extremely well. He's got a pretty good shot that he doesn't really use from close range all that often, but he's a really good mid-range shooter. And he's a guy who he's got a bit of a physical edge to him, right? Maybe not the best passer, maybe not the best sort of quarterback of a line, but as a really good complementary player, like with guys like Suzuki and Caulfield, I think that's where he belongs. I think that makes a ton of sense. Because when I watch Slafkovsky, I go, the puck touches are pretty good. I think that's where he's improved the most. Just that catch and release, give and go style of play. He's picked that up really well, I think. The physicality of his game is a little bit better than it was, I think, when he first started coming into the league. And I think that his one-touch passes in the offensive zone, just grab the puck, put it to someone in scoring areas. Like, he can quick strike offense pretty good. But I think it's a matter of, like, what you're expecting of him, right? Like, I think it's a matter of, like, what you think he is, right? Because I do agree, like as a playoff style player, he should be fine, right? Like I think he would definitely not take a dip in production in the playoffs, right? Especially if you're still playing him a ton of minutes. I don't think he's that style of player where when the rules kind of go out the window and things get more physical and faster and more intense, he falls apart. You know, I just don't think he's that type of player. But again, like I think he's kind of what I expected him to kind of be. He was going to take time to get here, but as a really solid NHL player that absorbs pressure and complements some faster, more dynamic and skilled players, I think that makes a ton of sense. And that's totally fine. Would I have drafted him first overall? Probably not, no. But, looking at him now, you kind of see sort of the wheels coming together. So it depends on kind of what you mean by consistency, because whenever I watch Slafkovsky, I look at him and I go, that's him. That's what you got, right? Like that's the guy. And he'll get stronger. He'll get, I think did he say he lost weight over the last little couple of seasons? Because that was another thing too to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, again, if you expect him to be like Jaromir Jagr, I don't think he's that. But as a good sort of complementary pressure absorbing guy that can keep it simple but really effective in a good way, great. I think that's what you kind of have, Who is a shutdown defenseman from recent drafts that you want everyone to know about? Feels like they don't get much buzz because of their playing style. It's a good question. It is a good question. Let me see. I mean, this year I kind of like Sean Barno with Dubuque. I like him. Obviously, Mertka, Fiddler. I think Hensler could be that. I like Quinn Beauchene a lot. He's not very big, but I think he's a really good shutdown player. Daniil Skvortsov as well, I think is okay. Aaron Dahlqvist in Sweden might be an option as a shutdown guy. Yeah. But in recent drafts, let me take a look here. Like, let's go back to 2020, for example. I mean, Brock Faber's the guy, I think, in that draft. Caden Gooley as well, another one. Braden Schneider as well, I would argue, is kind of up that alley. Jake Sanderson's a really good defensive player as well. There was a lot of them in 2020, for sure. 2021, guys that don't get a lot of heraldry. I don't think there were many in 2021. I kind of like Grushnikov, but I don't think he's an NHL player. I'm just scrolling. Maybe Ethan Del Mastro, maybe. I haven't really thought he's been that great in the NHL when I've seen him, but he's still very young, so maybe he develops into something more from here, but he's been a pretty decent defensive player when I've seen him. Elias Salamonson maybe could be a good one. The Vancouver Canucks seem to like the other Elias Pettersson quite a bit. I think David Reinbacher could be a good shutdown defenseman, but people talk about him all the time. Video room coming on him tomorrow, by the way. You could check that out when it comes out. But yeah, I mean, it's hard because a lot of these guys also don't really find jobs and full-time things until they're well into their 20s. Because playing defense in the NHL is really, 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 really hard. So yeah. Tough question to answer at this point, at least for me. Do you think Bruno Idan gets drafted? Would it be cool? Would it just be cool? It would just be cool to see a Croatian get drafted. I mean, maybe. I don't know. Look, I've been on the record about Bruno Idan for 2 years now about a guy I'm having a bad hair day today. I've been on the record about Bruno Idan for 2 years now about being a curiosity that might be one of these guys from a smaller hockey nation that breaks through and turns out to be something. He is outperforming what I expected in the USHL completely. And when I went to track some games on him, I saw the player I remember from last year when I was sort of watching him and going, yeah, like I could see how you score goals, but like I don't know. I don't know about projectability to the NHL. I think he works off of his line mates in Lincoln really, really well. But he's not, I don't know. Whenever I've watched him there, I don't see him as much of a play driver. He finds space okay in the offensive zone and they get him the puck and he can finish in a few different ways. So I don't know. I could see him get drafted, mid rounds, maybe, I guess. I just look at him and watch him when I play or when he plays. And again, I just go back to the same questions, right? Like, compared to the guys that I think you might be able to snag later in the draft, am I taking this guy ahead of him? Probably not. Like I look at re-entries elsewhere, like a Ludwig Johnson, right? Like if Ludwig Johnson left the National League after the season he's had and played in the USHL, I feel like he'd be dominant, right? Like he's been really good in the National League, and the areas where he hasn't been very good probably disappear in the USHL, all things considered. And does that mean that he's undrafted, right? Like I would have drafted him last year, but I would take him over a Bruno Idan probably. And so is there even a discussion really, right? Like because at any given point in the draft, you might be able to look at those guys and see more in them. But yeah, I mean, like I look at guys that I have ranked really high, like Tinas Koblar is a year or two younger, I think, or Bruno Idan a year younger and bigger. I think the skating needs work, but the skill level and the finishing ability and the physicality and the defensive play, it's all so good with him and he's not even ranked by Central Scouting. So he might be a guy that you get in the 7th round. Would I take him over a Bruno Idan? Probably not. So it makes it tough to really get a good evaluation of him because I've seen him and I'm a big fan of him, right? Like if he gets drafted, awesome. I think he's a mainstay for Croatia for decades, like that's how it's going to go. I think he could be a good college scorer for sure, but NHL, I'm not sold. I'd be very interested to see track data on Jake O'Brien. Does he beat the power play merchant allegations? I was unaware that he had power play merchant allegations, but I would say that that's a little overblown. Overall, he's pretty good. He does the thing about Jake O'Brien that I love. Oddly, it's kind of a similar story, but maybe not as exceptional as Ben Kindle. Like the thing I love about Jake O'Brien is he has that like sixth sense with puck possession. He sees. Are we back? We're alive. Okay. Pardon the interruption. Yeah, we're good, right? There we go. Yeah. Okay. So we're back. My apologies. I don't know what happened there. My OBS disconnected. But anyway, we're talking about Jake O'Brien. So what I love about him is he is a very, very good sort of secondary thinker. He anticipates the game really, really well. And I think he, it's a matter of like, is he going to get away with those extra few seconds that he wants with the puck in the offensive zone? I don't know. I don't know the answer of that. But he doesn't waste his shots when he gets them. He's a pretty good passer. He passes the puck a ton. He's a pretty reliable offensive rush player, I think, even though it says turnover machine here. I think that data is a little bit, or that filter is a little bit too critical of players, which I might need to adjust. But he's a very, very smart player. Like definitely one of those players this year. If we just talked about 2020 and how good the offensive or the more defensive leaning players were, if we're talking about that, this year might be the sort of smart, solid all around defense or centers. And I think O'Brien's one of those. Like I just watched him the other day. He was pretty good. Like he's been pretty good every single game. Is he sort of a really projectable NHL center? I'm not so sure, but he's a first round pick. I think he has a ton of potential and you bet on the brain. And I think any skill and skating development from here is only going to make him better and better and better. His shot selection is good. He's a good passer. There's a lot to like about him. I don't know. like the power play merchant stuff I would not buy, but he would be a really, really good power play playmaker, to say the least. Kindle or Reshny? I go with Kindle. I want to love Reshny so bad, and a lot of his numbers are good, but I just don't think it's going to work. Like, I don't know. He plays a style of play where if he were bigger, I'd be more excited about him. But God love him. You know, I wish for the best for him because I love how he plays. He just kind of lacks the pace and the true sort of skill level. You know, he's at his best moments when things are toughest, which is so interesting to me. And when things get tough in the WHL, it's one thing, but when things get tough in the NHL and you're 5'9", 5'10", it's very, very different. And I feel like that's really when he comes alive. Really good passer, though. Brilliant passer. I like Kindle more because I think Kindle is a little smarter with how he moves the puck, how he sees the ice, how he generates offense, how he can get scoring chances on his own. He's a lot more involved in transition play than Reshny is. But Reshny is more physical. He's more intense. He grinds things out a little bit more on his own, which Kindle does not do, granted, but I think Kindle doesn't really do that because that's not really his forte. But what is his forte, I think, works in the NHL a lot more than what Cole Reshny's forte is. So that's why I have him higher. What is Logan Stankoven's ceiling in Carolina? Can he make it at center? I don't think Stankoven's going to be a center in the NHL, and I don't think I ever would have thought that. But a rambunctious 200-foot energy winger who can score and hit and skate and just be a bug in your bonnet, a bee in your bonnet. Yeah, he's that. Is he a center with Carolina? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Carolina's forward group right now up the middle is listed as Aho, Kotkaniemi, Stahl, Jankowski. I mean, maybe there's a role for him ahead of some of those guys up the middle, especially once Jordan Stahl kind of takes a hike at some point in his career. Maybe, but I wouldn't be jumping to conclusions that he's going to play there. And I think, again, similar to the discussion about Connor Bedard, like I think it lends itself to Stankoven's biggest strengths by being in that position. Would I try him at center? Sure. You know, I would try it. Why not? I like to have fun. Let's try it. If he can handle it, he can handle it. Do I think it'll stick? I mean, he would have to prove me wrong, basically. Is that, I think that's reasonable. You know, feel free, buddy. Go out and prove me wrong. But I just think it's best for him and the way he plays to be that, you know, really, 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 really good auxiliary, all situations, do everything winger who can score. Yeah. Do you think Xavier Villeneuve is a viable top 16 pick for the 2026 draft? Undersized Quebec defensemen don't get love from NHL teams. I'll tell you what. I think Xavier Villeneuve's the real deal, man. I love him. I know he's a little small. I don't know. I love him. Every time I watch Justin Carbonneau, I go, Villeneuve was better. Villeneuve is the guy. He's the man. He's a bad, bad man. Like, if Villeneuve were available in this year's draft, which he almost is as one of the youngest players available in this year's draft, if he were, I don't think, oh man, I don't know where I would put him, but he'd be one of the best defensemen for me, honestly. Like, the dynamic, over the last decade, I would say, the guys drafted really high, and I mean really high, defensively, by and large, with the exception of maybe a Jake Sanderson, by and large, the defensemen drafted really, really high that really have found really high-end NHL jobs are the dynamic, skilled, one in a million offensive-leaning defensemen who can run a power play. They can skate the puck up the ice. They can work the puck in the offensive zone. And maybe in the defensive zone, they're not like incredible, but you hope that they can get there at some point. And with Villeneuve, I see a lot of that. Like, that he has that sort of like Lane Hutson level, like, evasiveness and creativity and shiftiness to his game that you just don't find all day. You don't find that very often. And really beautiful skater. I don't know. I'm curious. I have him locked on in 2026 on my little thing that I have set up already for next year. He's one of my top tier guys to focus on right away. Like I usually order it by like, I want to look at these guys first, right? These are the priorities from what I've seen. And he is right at that top group. I love him. I think he's a great player. And that's from me, right? Like, obviously, we've had Tony on this show, and he has had some less than desirable things to say about the QMJHL, but I am here to say, like, I think he is the real deal, right? Like, I think the Quebec League this year has some really strong players, and next year, a guy like Villeneuve is an extremely good example of a really good one that could come out of Quebec, perfectly legitimately. Buffalo needs to nab a Sergachev-like player from a perennial contender. I mean, maybe. But think about what Utah gave up to get Sergachev, right? They gave up Jonas Moser and more. Connor Geekie, right? Like they paid a lot to get Mikhail Sergachev. So is Buffalo going to trade Peyton Krebs and Bowen Byram and a pick for Gustav Forsling or Aaron Ekblad? Like, I don't know. Is that going to fix it? I don't know. The thing about getting Sergachev was that Utah already had some good pieces on the team and they just had a bit of trouble defensively. And now they've, I guess, taken a step. I actually haven't looked at the NHL standings in a while. At least not since we had Grav on the show. I think that was last week or 2 weeks ago. But in any case, yeah, I don't know. Buffalo needs Jesus. That's what they need. Utah's just outside of a playoff spot. Okay, so they're making a push, kind of. They're not in the basement, so there's that. What's the thing Micah McCurdy has? The sadness factor, like the teams that are most likely to finish short of the playoffs but not have a high draft pick. They're probably one of the top teams there. So anyway, let's move on. Okay, so Ricky following up. I wasn't saying I'd keep Dahlia and Thompson, just saying those were the only two I'd consider core. I mean, I guess, right? I mean, obviously I'm not saying you literally trade everybody else, but if you did do that, right? Like if you take a look at that roster, if you did do that, what are you getting? What are you getting to build with for the future, right? Is anyone going to give you a first round draft pick for a Jason Zucker or a Jack Quinn or Jordan Greenway? If you trade Owen Power, what are you getting? You maybe get a good prospect in return. Like if I'm looking at Owen Power's results and watching his tape, I'm going, if he wasn't drafted first overall, would I give you a tremendous amount for him? Probably not. Bowen Byram, he hasn't really done himself any favors in Buffalo either. So it's a matter, for me, it's like a matter of like, if you want to tear it down, no matter which direction you look, you're not going to get that much. And so unless you trade a Tage Thompson or Rasmus Dahlin or maybe, even a Zach Benson, like is an NHL teams let Zach Benson fall, right? And Buffalo snagged him, and he's the one young player, really, that has grasped an NHL job, looked not out of place, and at this age, I did not expect him to be in this role. So I don't know why you would trade him. But I think NHL teams would undervalue him because they undervalued him 2 years ago. So I look at this roster, and I go, if I wanted to blow this up, I'm not going to get much, right? So maybe there's like a Calgary Flames style thing you can do. I mean, again, the Calgary Flames are a big vibes team and they have a great rookie goaltender right now. So there's that. And I think they're getting a bit of luck on their side too. I don't know. Again, I think the bigger issue is something that isn't just the team, right? Like I think in Buffalo, there's a vibes thing, and it can't just be because Buffalo is maybe not the most desirable place to live. The Winnipeg Jets are one of the best teams in the league, right? At least on paper. So there are players in Winnipeg that are feeling good and playing well and they're winning, right? That's a thing that exists. So, and Buffalo has been good in the past, right? So I don't know. At the end of the day, I just don't know what the issue is. I don't know. I'd have to get a peek behind the curtain and really feel out what the vibes are like there because I don't know. And they hired some smart people there too, right? Like Sam Ventura's there. And he's a really smart guy from everything I've seen. So I don't know. And they have some young players, but I don't think they're there yet, right? So maybe a bet on that. but it's a tough situation. They're in a tough spot, I think. Cam Lund seems to be improving year over year. What's his NHL projection? Yeah, I mean, Cam Lund's a good player. I think he's one of the leading NCAA scorers this year. At least he's up there. And let me look here. Cameron Lund is... Yeah, he's over a point a game. So, yeah, I think he is maybe a good two-way third-line center. Like, I don't think he's a guy that I watch and I go, yeah, he's probably going to finish up as a winger. Like, I think he's got, the size and the evasiveness and the skill level to sort of work as a center up the middle of the ice somehow. But yeah, really, really skilled player, really confident with the puck. I've been a fan of his for a while. He was drafted, I think, right where I had him ranked or something like that. He wasn't my best player available at 34 then, but he wasn't far off. And I like him as a really interesting potential middle six, probably third line skilled center that maybe he gets to that point, right? Like, I'm not saying it's a certainty, but I think that's kind of where his NHL role might land. Maybe he could play on the wing. I don't see why not with the sort of the skill level and the size that he has, maybe. But I think I'd try him at center and see if he can handle it and see if he can do it and see what happens. How does Mario Lemieux's metric? Oh my God, let me try that again. How does Mario Lemieux's metrics look? Whoops, I meant Porter Martone. Easy to mix them up. Hey, you're a person after my own heart because I'm team Mario Lemieux is the GOAT. Let's see, Martone here. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about Porter Martone here. So let me start off by saying that I am a huge Porter Martone fan. I think he is an excellent hockey player. But the numbers in a lot of ways for him, especially when it comes to shooting the puck, are a little bit underwhelming. He is, though, I think, a premier perimeter playmaker, quarterback pass first type guy. Huge pass volumes, pretty good completion, but huge amounts of offensive zone generation. Like, his shot assist numbers are really, really good. His offensive threat metric, which, if you're not familiar, is a combination of dangerous slot pass attempts, like slot pass attempts in general, and the player's shot volume from scoring areas combined. So generally, in my experience over the years, like 20 to 25 is like a pretty reasonable candidate to be a first round pick, especially at higher levels of play like the OHL. If you're over 30 or something, then you're real good. You're looking real good. And this year I've scaled it a little bit differently for defensemen to like inflate that number because they don't get as much offensive opportunity. So I wanted a way to equalize that. In Matthew Schaefer's case, it's gone way beyond that. I think he's at like 80, but I've only done 2 games of him because he's barely played. But with Porter Martone, all around, like, I really like him. He is a very good transition player with really good involvement going both ways. He's physical. He can generate turnovers in the offensive zone pretty well. He's skilled. He's a really good playmaker, I think. I think he is a little bit less engaged and a little bit slower than I would like, but especially after having interviewed him, he's a guy who I think he said that's what he wants to work on. So for me, he's a guy who brings a lot to the table that you love to see. I think he's a great player. I think he is, as much as I love him, I still have Victor Eklund ahead of him, but I cannot put Martone at 6. I don't think I can do that. The guy I have at 6 right now is Cullen Potter. And say what you will, I love him. I think he's a great player, and I think he has huge amounts of potential. But there's a teardrop, literally TIER, not TEAR, where Porter Martone, like, I think if you write him off as a guy who you have doubts about, and NHL teams go, yeah, he's a winger and like not the fastest guy in the world, maybe he fizzles out or whatever, maybe he's not a thing. That's at your own risk, right? Like, I don't know. I see a Porter Martone kind of like a Dustin Brown type player, but with a bit more skill to him, where it's like he's a hard-nosed, competitive guy who could wear a captain's a captain's jersey at some point in his career, who you love to have on your team. He helps you win in the playoffs. May not ever score 100 points, but Dustin Brown was an LA King for like 20 years. You know what I mean? And players don't stay with the same team for 20 years just because, right? So Porter Martone, I feel like, is that brand of player. So he might not have that like highlight reel skating ability and that highlight reel electrifying talent, but he's a really, really good hockey player that you want on your team. And I think as a teammate, you want to play with a guy like that. And I think he's a good player. What kind of player does Columbus need to draft in the first round considering their standing? Well, let me just go to Tankathon here. Tankathon.com. It's a .com. Okay, I was about to say .net. Is there even .net websites anymore? I guess BattleNet. Isn't BattleNet Battle.net? Like the Blizzard Entertainment thing? Anyway. Again, like AJ and I said, this show 1 week at a time is turning into a gaming show. I was up until 2:30 last night playing Civ 7 again. I had to conquer my whole continent because my allies turned on me for some reason, even though we were allies. I mean, there's a lot of that going around these days, but anyway. Columbus, where are they? Oh, Columbus is sitting potentially in a playoff spot. According to Tankathon, they are in a playoff spot. So for Columbus, I mean, Columbus is kind of like Chicago. They've drafted so much that they kind of have a little bit of everything. They have a lot of scoring. They have some defensive leaning guys. They have some offensive leaning guys. They have some two-way guys. They have a little bit of everything. So if you're in the middle of the first round, you can kind of cast a bit of a wide net, right? Like you obviously don't draft. I don't think you draft on like NHL need. But when I look at this team, I kind of maybe see some holes on defense and maybe long-term in your bottom 6. I mean, when you look at this team, you don't see a playoff team, but here they are, right? And I'm cool with that. So for me, if I'm Columbus, I just look and see if there's anyone who's really, really, really talented that slips that far. For me, the key candidates there would be like a Cullen Potter, who I think would be if you like Adam Fantilli, man, I feel like you could add a heck of a player in Cullen Potter. But like if Jackson Smith slips that far, that could be a really good pickup for them. Carter Bear could be a good pickup there in the mid-first round as well. I would be amazed if Anton Frundell was there. I don't think that's going to happen. Ben Kindle probably will be available there. Does he strike me as a Columbus Blue Jacket? Not really. Braden Coots, maybe. Cameron Schmidt. No, I don't think anyone's taking Cameron Schmidt that high. Like for me, I think Cullen Potter in the mid-first round is just going to be the guy for me, right? Like I think in terms of electrifying, skilled, insane offensive talent with potential defensively, and like he's been playing center all year and like learning how to play that position a little more. I would be happy to pick up a guy like that if I were a playoff bubble team. Give him a couple more years to play 20 minutes a game at Arizona State and see what he turns into. Because in the middle of the second round, in the middle of the first round, if you're getting like a good second line guy, I think you're doing really, really well. And I think Cullen Potter has all the potential in the world to be electrifying. And in Columbus, I feel like he's part of that he's part of what Columbus has that I think makes them so good. That Kent Johnson, Adam Fantilli, Kirill Marchenko style of play where, they have speed and intensity. Even guys like Sean Corrali and Justin Danforth, they can go, man. They go. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see who's available though in that area. Thoughts on Easton Cowan versus Callum Ritchie, OHL playmakers with top 6 upside. Well, I kind of give the tie to Callum Ritchie. I remember at the draft, at draft time, Callum Ritchie kind of rose on my board towards the end of the year. Like he was injured a little bit during that year, and he got kind of better and better and better every time I saw him that year. And by the end of the year, he was skilled and creative and made plays on the fly really, really effectively. He was a good player. Cowan is, I think, extremely smart. Like I think Cowan is going to be a good complementary third line winger. I don't think he's going to be a top 6 center or something like that for Toronto. Like he's a little small. but he sees the ice really well. He works his tail off, and he moves the puck really smartly. But I think Ritchie has that skill level and confidence and forward, like northbound, playmaking and skating ability that I don't know if Easton Cowan has as much of, that I think makes him a little bit more of a threatening sort of top six winger in the NHL. But they might end up playing similar roles on different NHL teams, and like you could take it or leave it who you think is better, because I think they do different things better than the other, right? Like they kind of complement each other a little bit. What is Voronkov's ceiling? Oh boy, I don't know. I honestly haven't seen as much of Dmitry Voronkov to answer that question. Voronkov. I haven't honestly seen as much of Voronkov that I can give you a good answer to that question. He's a big boy. Holy smokes, 6'5", 240. I do love Kirill Marchenko though, and those guys I think are playing together. So take that for what you will. But yeah, honestly, I haven't seen enough of the Blue Jackets this year to really, really give you a good answer on that. Okay. Okay. What were your thoughts of Mason McTavish in his draft year? So I had McTavish ranked lower than where he got drafted, but I did see him as one of the more projectable players in the class. Like, and for the Ducks, like the Ducks love guys like McTavish. Like you can tell. And if you're not like McTavish, you have an uphill battle. Like look at Trevor Zegras, right? I felt like Mason McTavish was a very good wrecking ball player, right? Like I felt like in 2021, I wondered how much more growth you were going to get out of his game because of how he played, right? Fast, intense, pretty good shooter already, goes to the net, plays hard, loves the game, tries hard, big, mean guy. And I felt like, yeah, he's going to be an NHL player of some kind. And I thought maybe a middle six center or winger, depending on what you need out of him. Sure. And I mean, at 3, I didn't think that that's what, I would be aiming for there. But if you just want a guy who, a heart and soul player is going to go over the boards and give, if that's the kind of team that you want to be, you may as well go out and draft a guy like that and see how it shakes out, right? If you're Anaheim. So he hasn't really like grown in his production or really like role since becoming an NHL player, but I think that's kind of realistic based on what I remember from when he was draft eligible, right? Like there are these guys sometimes when you watch them, you go, yeah, if you plopped this guy into the NHL right now, they'd be able to do some stuff. Are they gonna be like elite offensive talents? I'm not so sure about that, but they'll be useful. They'll be physical. They'll be complimentary. They'll hit guys. They'll play hard. They'll do everything you need them to do. So, yeah, I mean, he's kind of worked out similarly to how I felt he was going to work out. For a while there, he was a lot better than I thought, like in the NHL. Like he came into the NHL and was better than I thought that he would be right away. But over time, he's kind of like stayed that way. So intriguing. He's an intriguing one. But yeah, at the time of the drafts, I thought he might have been drafted a little high, but if you want an NHL guy who plays that NHL style and coaches are going to love him and he'll do what you ask him to do, he's that guy, right? Gunther, okay, whatever. Thoughts on Borales? I honestly have not seen him. I wanted to take a look at him, but I have not had the time. I mean, 2004, like usually CHL overagers are guys, but he's a free pickup. If you get something out of him, great. If I had my pick of 04s in the WHL, probably Kenta Isegai, but no. I mean, I'll have a look at Borales because you never know. I haven't yet though, to be perfectly honest. But the track record for signings like that are generally pretty limited. Where were we here?
Yes, Ben Danford's a good candidate in 2024 for a defensive guy who's perfectly fine. In your opinion, who are the most Canes-friendly prospects, aka likely to get picked in the second round or below, but is undervalued due to size or other factors? Yeah, Ben Kindle. If he falls out of the first round, I feel like Carolina jumps on him. Maybe Riker Lee could be a fun Carolina Hurricane. I doubt Cullen Potter falls out of the first round, but it would be very funny if he did and went to Carolina. It's hard to say. I mean, the Brenus boys have really become close to me. Like, I think those guys are all real good. Michael Sverchek, Gustav Hillstrom, and Leo Sundqvist. I think Hillstrom is a really just like, I don't know if there are many players in this game in this season that are like as positionally smart and capable of being in the right positions all the time with their skating ability up the middle of the ice at as hard a level as they play at as Hillstrom in the SHL. Like, he keeps up with play and just he's in the game so much in the SHL and I mean, Sverchek has been there for a long time in a row now, playing pretty decent minutes. Same thing with Sundqvist, and those guys don't look out of place at that level either. And if I'm Carolina, like, those guys might be a little small, but Hillstrom's not. But those guys are all, I think, really undervalued. Just in terms of like projectability to the NHL, like, I think they all bring a little bit of that. I think I've really come a long way as well since December on Jacob Wozniak out of Sweden. Like, he might be an interesting one if people kind of forget about him a little bit, but I don't think they will. He's too big for people to forget that. But in my books, like, if you get a guy like Michael Sverchek with a pick in Carolina, like 50, yeah, I would do it. I would be like, yep, that's Carolina. They know they're good at this. Because, yeah, I just watched another game of his, and every single SHL game I see of Sverchek, he comes away with a scoring chance, at least one pretty good scoring chance. He comes away with at least one really good playmaking opportunity. And in the SHL, at that age, doing that is an accomplishment. Lucas Raymond was a better sort of generator of production in general, like in terms of offensive threat, so to speak. But Sverchek, I clocked Sverchek blue line to blue line on a rush faster than Lucas Raymond by over a tenth of a second, which is a lot. And he's one of the faster guys blue line to blue line that I've tracked this year, and that's in the SHL. So it's pretty wild to see those guys play. And so I think this year the draft really opens up really quickly, and I don't know how many guys there are that I look at and go, I could see this guy slipping out of the first round. Like, Cameron Schmidt comes to mind. You know, like, I feel pretty confident that Cameron Schmidt will be available at a certain point, and you'll go, how is he still here? Like, this is as good a bet as any, right? Here, there might be reasons for this, for sure, but even if we miss on him, it's not the end of the world at this point, but he's probably worth a bet. So maybe Cameron Schmidt's the easy choice here. But for me personally, with the guys that I really like, there are quite a few that I think, you know, Eric Nilsson might be one. I think a guy like Rod Brindamore would really like a guy like Eric Nilsson. So yeah, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting year, especially for Carolina, and you're a team that likes to make solid bets. But yeah. Thank you so much for the very generous super chat there. I believe you did that same thing the other day, so thank you very much. You're keeping the lights on this month. And yes, you're very welcome. I'm happy to. I love doing this. This is a great thing. It's a great outlet for me, both creatively and practically. You know, the NHL draft is obviously a small component of a much bigger picture, but it's hockey. I love it, and I am also, maybe it's ADHD or something, but I'm like obsessed. I am obsessed with like the future, you know, like I love setting things that set the stage for the future, right? Like I grew up, I as a musician, I played bass in bands growing up. I don't want to be in the limelight, right? Like, I don't want to be that guy, but I do want to be an important background member, right? Oh, geez, look at this guy going nuts. Thank you so much for the gifted memberships. That's amazing. So, by the way, since we're in membership land right now, again, amazing. Thank you so much for your generosity. Email me. Please email me, scouching@gmail.com, and I will get you access to an account on the website. It's a bit clunky. I can't intertwine the two. So email me, scouching@gmail.com, and I'll get you your account set up with a free coupon code up there. So thank you so much. And everyone who got the gifted subs, enjoy. Where were we? But yes, I mean, yeah. So with the, I'm obsessed with the future. I'm obsessed with the future of the game. I love the sport. And so for me, it's like, it's a great way to see what's out there, you know, and see the growth of the game and see what young people are doing with the sport. I think we always underestimate what young people do and what they're capable of and all that. And so to put a bit more of a spotlight on that in a constructive way, that's not just like, this guy's sick, or this guy's better than this guy, or this guy's better than this guy. Like, honestly, like, putting them in a situation where it's like, hopefully, I think, beneficial for their growth. Like, I've had a couple of draft prospects reach out to me and like ask me some things, and it's not very often, but I always try to be constructive about everything, right? Like, it's about, like, if I'm being critical or something, it's not to like make you feel bad. It's like, because I want there to be growth. I want the best out of this person. And I think in order to do that, sometimes you need to explore and be very clear about constructively fixing issues, right? And I think that there's a way to do it constructively, and there's a way to be a jerk about it and make them feel bad and punish them, right? Like, I'm not a punishment fan, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm hoping that's the way this all comes off, because I love to do it, and I think it's really, really cool. And you can't stop me. And by sending us money and buying subs for other people, you're definitely not going to stop me. So thank you very much. It definitely means a lot, and very much appreciated. But anyway, back to the questions. Do you watch any goalies for the draft? A little bit. Being that your username is Crease Analysis and your avatar image is a goalie, I am 99.9% certain you would watch more goaltending than I do. And also for goaltenders, I have David Phillips for that. Keen watcher of the show and member of the community, who we love very much. He's supposed to come on the show at some point. We need to organize that. But he is working on some exclusive subscriber content covering some goaltenders for the draft this year. So you can take a look at that at any tier on the site. And you can, but I do once in a while. Last year, I started to really try to just sit back and do what I did with skaters years ago, where it's like, all right, who are the guys that are really highly ranked in the NHL draft and why, right? Why are these guys the guys that are it, right? And then going back a few years and going, okay, who are the guys that really worked out, right? Who are the guys that worked out that weren't super high draft picks and why? Who were the guys that didn't work out and were super high draft picks and why? So trying to do that with goaltenders, it's very difficult because, you know, they're goaltenders. One could be good one year and then awful the next two. But I mean, the trend that I've seen, and it's obviously more complicated than this, but the trend is that you can honestly do a lot of good work with goaltenders by looking at their statistics. Like, a lot of this, honestly, when it comes to the draft, is like knowing who you don't want. And so with goaltenders, it's very binary. You make the save, you don't make the save, right? So you're either drafting goaltenders that are really good at stopping the puck as they are now, and you're just going to bring them along, you know, and hope that trend continues, or you're going to draft a guy who might not be very good at stopping pucks, and you try to increase the probability that they stop a hockey puck. I know which one I would put my money on, and I would say that the vast majority of NHL goaltenders that play a lot and have had long careers are those first type of goaltenders where they are saving a ton of pucks a lot. Like, for example, look at Connor Hellebuck. He was playing in the Null, I think, and he was facing huge workloads that year, I think with the Odessa Jackalopes or something. And say, you know, you look at his goals against average and it's like 2.5 or whatever it was, but his save percentage was like 935. And if you do the math on that, that's like, I don't know, 35 shots a night. That's a lot of work, and he's saving a lot of those pucks. So that kind of points you in a bit of a right direction. I haven't done this recently, but the last goaltender I remember who was like a mediocre level goaltender in junior that became one of the premier goalies in the NHL was Braden Holtby. You know, like, so with goaltenders, it's really hard. Like, drafting a goaltender at 17 who you think could become a thing in the future, I don't usually do it. Like, for the team scouting thing I do, goaltenders are rarely on the docket for me, especially in the last few years, because I just don't know. And I'd much rather, like, sometimes teams just like sign a guy and they work out, right? Or a team waives a guy and you put a goaltender in a much better position. Maybe they're closer to home. Maybe they resonate with the coaching staff a lot more. They live a happier life for whatever reason they're in. They do a lot better, right? Like, coaching or goaltending is a very mental thing. And that's very difficult to hone in on and whatever, right? Like, a lot of scouts talk about, oh, this goaltender isn't rattled when he gets scored on. It's like, okay, great. Good. You don't want a goaltender who like gets rattled when they're scored on. But also, like, Dominik Hasek was a bit of a psycho. Like, when he got scored on, sometimes he was very upset. But he's the greatest goaltender that ever lived, right? Like, so that's not necessarily always true. So it's very, like, when I look at goaltenders, I obviously look for athleticism and stopping ability. And if you have that, it helps. Like, because the more athletic you are, the easier it will be to keep up with the fast pace of the NHL. And building up that athleticism to get to that point, I feel, is significantly more difficult from 17 to 20 if the kid's not already there. And it's the same thing with with prospects, right? Like with skaters. When I look at players, I go, what's my wish list for you between now and the NHL? And how long is that, right? Like, because the NHL is not the WHL. It is very different. There's a lot of different things that make you a good player there. And are you good at those things, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And with goaltenders, it's way murkier. So it's weird. But I do watch them. To answer your question, the answer is yes. Do you think that certain physical tools have stronger projection value for certain positions? Kind of. Like, I think in hockey, the beautiful thing I love about hockey is that you, at any position, could be good at a certain discipline and not so good in another and still be very effective. You know, it might be easier to like pre-scout you if you are looking elsewhere. Like, it might be a bit of a, you know, you look at, I don't know, yeah, like you mentioned in the question, like size mattering more for defense. I mean, it kind of does, but also, like, there are lots of gigantic defensemen who stink in the NHL. So why is that, right? There are plenty of fast centers who stink in the NHL. They're just not quite those premier level guys. It's a matter of like the rounding out of the picture. Like, what else do they bring to the table? Like, for me, I don't really think about like these traits would be better suited to this position. I guess I kind of do, but it's like, what is the full package that you're getting, right? Like, what is the player, you know, forgetting about the speed and the size and the whatever. It's like, how do they accomplish, you know, like, are they accomplishing the goals of a game of hockey, right? Are they getting the puck out of their own end and putting it in the opponent's end and putting the puck in the net? That's all you're doing. That's the game. That's simple. It's not that complicated, right? So, you know, yeah, it's not that complicated. So who are the guys that are doing that, and how are they doing it, right? I don't care about the rest. That you know, I don't really care about the rest. How are they doing it is like step 2. So there could be centers that, you know, I look at a Tinas Koblar, right? Not a very fast player, really, but he drives excellent numbers and has a lot of skill, really smart passer. He moves the puck really well, and I think it could work. Ben Kindle, not the most physical guy in the world. There's not really much of a physical player there at all. And he's also like not the speediest guy, but he's not slow. He's extremely skilled, but the way he applies everything as a whole just keeps marching the game up the ice. Like, he's like Tom Brady, where it's like, you look at Tom Brady highlights and you go, I mean, he's not bombing 60-yard passes all the time or running, you know, like Michael Vick out there, but 10 yards at a time, he's impossible to stop. And he just wins and wins and wins and wins. You know, it doesn't, to me, the end result is, are you scoring a touchdown? Are you winning football games? Are you marching the ball up the field, and are you hitting your targets, right? I mean, I know nothing about football, but I'm just saying, you look at the goal of the game and how the player does it and what they're accomplishing and how they do it. That's really all you're doing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's more about the whole picture, and the biggest thing is I work backwards from the NHL. Like, what is the NHL like? What do you need to be successful in the NHL in some way where if I'm a coach, I can throw you over the boards and I know for the next 35 seconds, this game is probably going to go more in the right direction than the wrong one. And if it doesn't, I can look over it with the player if there was something that went wrong, or I don't know, maybe it's just hockey. A bounce doesn't go your way. Someone dumps the puck and a defenseman, it just bounces over their stick because there's a divot in the ice that big. Whose fault is that? I don't know. Are you going to blame the Zamboni driver? No. So I don't know. It all, there's a lot of nuance to this is basically what I'm saying, I suppose. How are we feeling about Benson? Feels like he gets lost in the shuffle of Buffalo, but do we still believe in his upside? Never, ever, 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 ever doubt a 19-year-old playing in the NHL full-time, and Buffalo has every reason not to play him. Look at all the young guys they have in the minors, right? Like, they've left Noah Östlund down there. They didn't jump. Konsta Helenius didn't jump straight to the NHL. Isaac Racine still hasn't found a full-time job, and he's a point-a-game AHLer. Anton Wahlberg has had a pretty good year. He hasn't played in the NHL yet, at least not like full-time. I think he got a couple of games, but regardless, he's not there. So yeah, I think it would be crazy to lose faith in Zach Benson, and he's the type of player that I think you win with. Yeah. So no, he's definitely not on the list if I'm Buffalo to retool with. I like O'Brien a lot. I've just seen some power play merchant allegations out there. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I haven't personally, but I'm not like in the Twitter/Reddit sphere, like reading about these guys. I'm just watching them and forming my own opinions. I also don't really watch the power play at all. Maybe controversial to some, but I don't really care that much about power play time. 5-on-5 is where I really focus. And so I see O'Brien pretty much solely on 5-on-5. And while I think if you draft him like 5th overall, you might be taking a risk, I do think that he is very, very crafty and smart and clever and skilled and uses things very well to his advantage. So there's a lot to like about him. Yeah. And I could see how he's very, very positive on the power play. Crowbar wants to be a bee in my bonnet. Probably not. I mean, I guess I'm kind of growing my hair a little bit, so I might be losing things in my hair. Oh my goodness. Look at the gray. Oh my God, it's happening. Every time I get a haircut, the sides of my head are grayer. It's coming for you all, folks. I'm 34 years old. It's going to happen to you too. No, I mean, my bonnet. Speaking of bonnets, those new MLB hats, man. I want to get all of them. I just don't have any money. Maybe I will with the nice donations we've gotten here on the show today. I'll pick up a Tita's hat. Maybe you could be a bee in that bonnet. A bee? Oh God, no, never mind. I'm not going there. Let's stop this. I'm going to stop. Do you have player comps for Carter Bear, Lyndon Lakovich, William Eklund, or Victor Eklund, ceiling and floor? Well, let's see here. Let's pull up NHL. Let's just pull up the list of NHL leading scorers and who comes to mind. It's a very good question. I mean, Lyndon Lakovich. The first name that really jumped out at me about with Lakovich, I'm not saying these two players are going to be the same quality at the end of the day, but in terms of style of play, like maybe a Mikko Rantanen, like just a big and not really known for like the intensity and physicality of their game, but like the skill and the shot quality and the ability to find scoring opportunities and the patience with the puck and all of these things that Mikko Rantanen kind of has. I think Lakovic has that streak to him as well, and they're a similar size. And I feel like Lakovic's development curve with the right coach could be very, very good. Who else is here? I mean, Victor. Sorry, the other Eklund. Victor Eklund? It's a tough one. It's a tough question. I'm scrolling pretty far. But that's not a bad thing, you know? I don't know. Maybe like a Nazem Kadri on the wing style player, kind of like that, maybe, but maybe not as like maybe not as much as that like emotional Red Mist style that Kadri kind of has from time to time, or at least used to. Brian Rust, like really good, complimentary, high energy, physical but skilled guy who, you know, scores with good players on their line. I don't know, something like that. And that's not a knock against him. Like they're all good players. Yeah, like you mentioned Schwartz, like maybe that. Yeah, Eklund, I don't know if I'd call Eklund Connor Garland. Connor Garland is kind of more, who was it? There was someone on the show we talked about, and Connor Garland came up, and that made a ton of sense. Was it Cullen Potter? Or was it LJ Mooney? I don't remember. Someone came up as a Connor Garland, and then we all went, yeah, that could be a thing. I don't remember. Riker Lee? I don't know. Point is, that, I don't know. But Carter Bear, I mean, maybe Carter Bear is more of that Brian Rust type of player. Like, is William Eklund more of like, I don't know, maybe not a Jared McCann. But, yeah, I don't know. Maybe JJ Peterka with Carter Bear. Maybe there's a bit of that. Like, pretty skilled, but like physical, like a well-rounded winger who can do a lot really well. Maybe something like that. I don't know. Have you seen the defenseman class this year? Free agents. It's a weak and shallow class. Some people are getting wildly overpaid. You're probably right. I mean, that happens every year. But generally, teams want to keep their defensemen, so they sign them and lock them up. So, yeah, not a whole lot going on there, I don't think. What's your take on Reese Hamilton? Kind of feel like he's the post-hype underrated guy. Still like his game, even though he's had a bit of a down year. I mean, yeah, I would agree to a point. I haven't seen him in a while. I have a game of his that I'm procrastinating for like 3 weeks. So just for you, Mark, because I know you're a sub, I'll get to it. And Monday night, maybe we can talk about Reese Hamilton a little. Maybe Thursday next week. Thoughts on Danila Prokhorov? We kind of did that already in the show. I think top 20 is nuts, but he's an interesting player. He's a very intriguing player, very big, really skilled, wicked shooter. The rest is a work in progress. It's mostly felt like Matthew Schaefer at all costs for the Sharks, but recently Michael Misa has me thinking, why not add him? I mean, I don't think you go wrong with either of those players. Like, I think they're both going to end up very, very good NHL players for different reasons. If I'm San Jose, Schaefer's really hard to ignore. The injury isn't really a concern to me. Misa, though, is spectacular. Like, he's a great player, and I feel like he'd also be a really good addition. I don't know. Like, I go with Schaefer. I lean him a little bit, but look, if I was at a table, you know, with Sam McGilligan, Tony Ferrari, you know, a bunch of other morons, and we all said, if I said I want Schaefer and they all said I want Michael Misa, I go, all right, like, cool, let's do it. Let's do it. Michael Misa. How bad could it be? Famous last words. Clip this for 5 years from now when Michael Misa like blows out both his knees in the next 7 months and, you know, whatever. I hope that doesn't happen, for the record. I think Michael Misa is a great player. Thoughts on Viking Simon? Again with the Viking Simon. A 2010, was it 2010 Swedish player? Yeah, Viking Simon. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have Mikhail Holm on the show soon. I know he wants to come on, so we're going to try to have him on. He probably will come on for a Thursday show. Maybe I'll see if I can get him on for next week. And yeah, maybe you'll ask him. You can ask him about Viking Simon. Thoughts on Bryce Pickford as an overager? I mean, he's kind of a guy. He's I don't know. I've seen him for years. I had an NHL person actually ask for, they were like, hey, I'm curious what you think about this guy. I'd like to see your work. Let me know. And I sent him stuff and he said, nice job. And I never heard from them again. So take that for what you will. And he was like, we like him as a top 60 guy. And then he went undrafted. But anyway, I don't know. I think he's an okay player. Like I wouldn't draft him personally. But you know, he could probably go to college and have a good career there. Maybe. I don't know. You never know. I feel like I'm beating my head against a wall trying to get a read on Caleb Desnoyers. Clearly smart, some skill, a little dynamism, but a total lack of play scares me. Am I going crazy? No, it's not. No, it is not. I mean, look, I have gotten to the point where I have just got to accept that he is going to be drafted high. It's going to happen. There's just too much momentum out there. Like Corey Pronman, say what you will, right? Say what you will. Haters going to hate. I am not one of them. You know, I may disagree with him quite a bit, but I at least know that he is looped in. When he had Shane Wright at 4, he got laughed at. He was right. He was correct. He was at least correct about where teams were headed on him. So, if he has a Caleb Desnoyers ahead of James Hagens, and we had Scott Wheeler on as well, who is also tied in, and he thinks that there are scouts out there that have Caleb Desnoyers ahead of a James Hagens, then that is a thing that I am almost certain is real. Would I do that? No. Do I think he's going to be an NHL player? Yes. Do I have him ranked? I have him at 18 now. Like, I think as a third-line center who can muck it up, he plays a very balanced game, very smart game. I think it's fine. Fine. And I would say if you wanted him as high as 11 or 12, you could probably convince me to do it. But is he going to be there at that point? Probably not. Probably not. And that's fine. That's going to happen, right? Like, I just like other guys better. You can disagree. That's allowed. But I'm with you. Like, I see a good player there. I see a good player there. He's a very capable player. Does a lot of things well. He can elevate. You know, if you have a Connor Bedard on your wing, he could elevate Connor Bedard's game. He could be exactly the type of player that I said that maybe you put in on at center with Connor Bedard. Not saying I would do it, but you know, as that type of, I don't know. And I'm with you. Like, I've seen so much of Caleb Desnoyers this year. I have seen so much, and I still have not changed my mind. I still haven't. I just don't see a top 5 pick there, especially when a guy like Ivan Demidov went 5th overall last year, right? Like, I don't see that. But maybe I'll be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Okay, what do we got here? LJ Mooney, yes. I mean, I watched LJ Mooney today. It was the best game I've seen of him by far. And then when I tracked, who was it the other day? Conrad Fonder, now that he's back from injury in a different game, outshined by LJ Mooney. LJ Mooney, again, he's very quickly becoming a guy that you don't bet against. I'm not going to bet against that guy. Taking that hit earlier in the year, coming back as quickly as he did, didn't look great, stuck with it, and now he's where he is now, and I think he's played really well whenever I've seen him in the last month or two. I would be very interested to see where he goes in the draft, if he goes at all. But he is very quickly becoming a guy that I would take a look at because the speed is there now. He or at least it's on its way. The skill level is amazing. His playmaking ability is great. I think he had 7 slot pass attempts in the game I did today in 10 minutes of 5-on-5 time, or 11 minutes, which, if you're not familiar, is real good. It's really good. So yeah, good player. Yeah, Viking Simon. Yeah, it's his. Yes, we'll cover him with Mikhail. We'll ask him. Who or what is someone or something you want to tell your viewers that you weren't asked? Oh yeah, well, okay. This is a good place to end it. We'll call it after this because we're running overtime and I have to get my butt to Toronto. Honestly, yeah. If you want to tell your viewers that you weren't asked, it's a great question. You turned it on me now, you see. Do I like AJ? No, I'm kidding. That guy sucks. No, I'm kidding. He's a great kid. He's a great guy. Tries hard, loves the game. Great player to watch a hockey game with too, by the way. He is an adventurous individual. I'm still thinking. It's a really tough question. I'm checking something. I've been having a lot of fun becoming a farmer in No Man's Sky. There's that. That's something that I haven't told anybody because nobody cares. So, I'm not wishing someone asked me that maybe, but like I did not expect a week ago or a month ago that if I played that game again, that I would become a farmer. But if you farm the right things and do it in the right way, you can build things that make you millions and millions and millions of credits. So I feel like a real man when I do that. No, but is this going to be happening before the next show? Oh, it starts the day of the next show. So by the time we do our next show, this will already be underway. The Under-18 World Championship Division 2B gets underway in Sofia, Bulgaria on the 17th of March, featuring Taiwan, Spain, Serbia, Bulgaria, Belgium, and Australia. Australia's got a couple of guys in North America as well. So I'm going to be watching that. Yeah, maybe that'll be fun. I don't know. There's that. But then we have to wait until April for the World Under-18s to continue when you get Division 2A and 1B. So that's all I got, really. Also Simas Ignatavicius, the Lithuanian kid in Switzerland. Watched him the other day because he played a Champions League game not too long ago for the big team. He might be an interesting one. We talked about Bruno Idan earlier in the show. Simas Ignatavicius might be a guy where I think people might catch on to him over time, and because he's big, he's skilled, he's pretty good skater. Like, he is an interesting one, and he's Lithuanian, so the novelty is there, and he's almost certainly going to be on the under-18 team this year. He won't be there next year, but in Division 1B at this level, against who's his opponents this year? Estonia, France. France is in Division 1B. Japan, South Korea, and Poland. That's an interesting group. He should probably have some fun at that level, considering he played in the Swiss League this year, a game in the National League, and was a point a game in the Swiss Junior League. But anyway, that's going to be it for today. Again, to the whoever WG is, I'm going to imagine you're some sort of robber baron from 1910s running a steel company or something, and you have enough where you're willing to just open your wallets for us. But I am so thankful for that. Thank you so much for all of your very, very kind donations and everything. Whoever was gifted a membership, definitely reach out to me. Either DM me on Twitter with your username, or email me. Email is probably the easiest. And also be on our system. If you're not those people, don't email me or DM me and look to snag a free account. Please don't do that. But if you are interested in an account for yourself, you can go to Scouching.ca. And we've got a bunch of different tiers for various levels of interest. It's a lot of fun over there. We have a Discord server where we talk hockey all the time. It's a lot of fun. You'll get updates as well in the Discord server. I've really enjoyed giving updates on the tracked players that I do on a daily basis generally. If I miss a day, I do it the next day and catch up or whatever. But that's been really interesting as well. We've had some good chats about that as well. So if you're interested in that, check it out. And thanks very much for joining us. This is going to be a lot of fun. Now I've got to put on some big boy pants and get myself on the go train and go to Toronto. So if I see you in Toronto at the Leaf game tonight, say hello. But I'm excited. It's gonna be fun. You'll get to meet me and AJ if you're there. I don't know where we'll be sitting, but keep your eyes peeled. We'll be around. I think it'll be lower bowl, but anyway, AJ's a fancy man. He's got fancy seats, so we'll see. But anyway, thanks again for joining us. This was a ton of fun, and we'll see you Monday night. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll have AJ back, and we're trying to get a guest for next Thursday. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, everybody. Again, thank you for your very kind donations and gifted memberships. It means a lot. Again, email me or DM me or something. Find a way to contact me. There's a whole bunch of different ways, and we'll figure that out. So thank you very much, and we'll see you Monday night. Okay, toodles.